Hey, what's up everyone? Adam here with brahwegotthis, and today I'm going to help you determine whether or not you're ready for harder content in this game, and how to decide when is a good time to start doing some of the in-game activities. You could call this a pseudo in-game content guide, but this is a common question that is asked a lot in my Twitch chat every week. So I thought I would address this and possibly help some players out who are trying to transition from the beginner to the mid game, because a lot of videos that I'm going to be talking about here soon in the channel is the mid game. I think a lot of players struggle with that. But before we get started, if you would like to become a patron, you can check that link out in the description. Thank you to every patron, and thank you to the newest patron, Licorice. I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much. If you want to become one, check that out in the description. And you can always come and watch me play live on twitch.tv/brahwegotthis. That is in the description, as well as our Discord. And you can always check out our content on brahwegotthis.com. So the question that is asked all the time in my Twitch is, Adam, when do you recommend me doing X activity? And this usually results in, Adam, when should I start doing veteran dungeons? Or when should I start doing a trial? Can I do vet maelstrom arena with this character or this X level? These are just a few of the questions that I receive in my Twitch chat, but I think they are very valid because the game doesn't really tell you, like, hey, here's when you should be able to do this activity. So I want to break down a few categories that I've thought of that can help determine if you are ready to delve into harder content. The first thing I want to address is understanding level does not equate to player skill. So your overall CP level is something with time, obviously, that will give you and afford you more passive benefits for your character or build. However, I do want to focus a lot, though, that the number next to your CP isn't always an indication of someone's skill. I mean, I still fall in holes in trials, and my chat trolls me for it. So I'm above CP 1000, and I still do things like that, right? So it's not an indication of the best player in the game. The reason I'm telling you this is, as we go through some of these categories and explanations, I want you to understand that if you feel confident that you can do a veteran dungeon at CP 160 because you know your rotation, you're pulling good DPS, it's easy to you, don't let the CP number stop you from trying. Now, you may get in there and you are over your head and you need to go back and practice. That might happen. I also want to say that activities like vet trials do require a solid amount of CP, usually because you need to hit certain thresholds. Again, the reason I'm saying this is because I've seen players with low CP do way better in an activity than a high-level CP player. And as you get into the harder content, skills and practice will ultimately be the determining factor if you can do a said piece of content rather than your level. So let's go through the types of in-game content that are in ESO. We're not going to include PvP because I don't PvP very often. I'm then going to break down in a tier fashion where each of these pieces of in-game content fall, in my opinion. These aren't necessarily set in stone, but I believe these are the easiest to hardest things to complete in ESO. What I'm going to do is put a quote-unquote soft level threshold that you can be at to attempt these activities. Again, it is not a requirement necessarily, but they are just to help you understand goals that you can set for yourself. So first, we have base game dungeons. These are unlocked through from level 10 to level 45. These have normal and veteran versions, and some of these dungeons have second variants. For instance, you have Banished Cells 1 and 2, Elden Hollow 1 and 2, and so on. As you go through at level 10 to level 45, realistically, they get a little harder the higher the level you unlock them at. And typically, the second version of the dungeon, like Banished Cells 2, is going to be harder than Banished Cells 1. At level 45, you unlock DLC dungeons. These are from the dungeon DLC packs. These are typically harder content. These have normal and veteran versions as well, but the vet version is extremely more difficult. Something to note as well is DLC and base game dungeons, when ran on veteran mode, have the ability at the final boss to activate hard mode for the final boss. Okay, the hard mode can range anywhere between extra health or added mechanics that you need to achieve. Next, we have trials. These are 12-man raids in ESO, and these have normal and veteran versions. Some of these trials have modes that you can activate that increase the difficulty as well, and we will talk more about that in a few minutes. The last main piece of PvE in-game content is arenas. You have 2 solo arenas, Maelstrom and Vadishran Hollows, and you have 2 multiplayer arenas, Dragonstar Arena and Black Rose Prison. These have normal and veteran versions as well. Okay, so now that you know what the in-game content is in PvE, I want to talk to you about how to know you're ready to tackle these different activities in this game. There's a few factors that you can take into account when trying to decide this. Like I said, I'll give you a soft level requirement or tier breakdown of what is easiest to hardest, but it's important to answer the how do I know I'm ready for this practically as well. Do I need certain gear? Do I need to have all my passives? Can I use only one skill? There's a lot of questions that players ask when they get to level 50 and to level 160 CP, because they just aren't really sure if they are ready to take that step. So when I go through the tier list, I will explain practical expectations. The biggest takeaway I want you to gain from this video, if you learn nothing else, is when you run group content, it's not about you, it's about your team. Unless you are running a solo piece of content trying to solo a dungeon, it's not about you. So I don't mean that in a condescending way. I want this to encourage you, because if you're not trying content because you think you are going to let the team down, you can't let that deter you from trying harder content. Because if you keep telling yourself that, it's impossible for you to have a baseline of knowing where you are skill-wise. So I'm not saying that you won't struggle at veteran content, but if you try it out and you find that you are struggling, then you know what you can work on. So many players are afraid to try harder content because they feel like they are a weak link. Y'all, I am mediocre, and when I do vet DLC dungeons, it's a team effort. If one person struggles, another person may be able to pick up the slack. So if that's holding you back, don't let it, okay? Now, I'm going to say that I believe there are certain expectations at certain in-game content activities, and we are going to go through those with the tier list, because I don't want you thinking that you can just roll up to a veteran trial with 2 skills and 2 pieces of armor on. Your team is going to be pretty mad if you do that. So let's go through the tiers. Normal base game dungeons are the easiest form of content. You can start doing these at level 10 through CP 3600. You don't need to wait, because again, these are very, very simple. There are a lot of sets you can farm in these dungeons that are really good sets. So you're going to be getting higher levels in your queues all the time. So don't wait until you're CP 500 to do a dungeon. You can start doing base game normal dungeons as soon as they are available. Now again, the second form of the dungeon is a little more difficult, but you will be fine. Now, veteran base game dungeons, here is our first skill check. A lot of people don't know when they should run these. With veteran base game dungeons, the hardest of these are going to be the second form of the dungeon usually, and some offshoots of standalone dungeons like Dire Frost Keep Final Boss is a little bit of a DPS and skill check for beginner players, as well as a few other vet dungeons. The only real difference in veteran dungeons, though, is increased health from ads or bosses. And so with that comes the requirement to pull more DPS. What that means is if your group isn't pulling enough DPS, or they are just taking a while to kill something, this trickles down and affects your healers and your tanks, because it puts a constraint on their resources, because they have to keep their buffs and debuffs up and their heals up longer. So I would say for vet dungeons, a good soft level requirement would be around a CP 200. This would allow you to get some extra CP passes, but not only that, it'll give you time to farm for sets that you need. I would say it's expected that you have at least 2 5-piece sets on when running a veteran dungeon, and really there isn't any sort of reason why you shouldn't, because you can run all these dungeons on normal to farm sets. You can farm overland content, you can craft sets. The only thing you won't have is a monster set, because you'll need to do it on veteran. I think if you go into a vet dungeon without completed sets, it's really going to hinder the team. So make sure you are ready for that and have those things in order. Now, let's talk about the hard modes of vet dungeons. This is a hard variable to predict, but you won't necessarily need to be any higher level than CP 200 if you are pulling solid DPS and no rotations and all of that good stuff. But some hard modes may require more practice and more levels, and that is definitely true, okay? Because again, it is a huge variable. It's hard to really break down every single hard mode. Next, we're going to talk about normal DLC dungeons and normal arenas. I think that these are very close to each other on difficulty, and comparatively to vet base game dungeons, they are usually a little harder than the normal arenas and normal DLC dungeons. But again, some players may find that to be flip-flopped a little bit. So it's pretty close for me, but DLC dungeons on normal can be done at level 45. And to be honest, I don't find these that hard at all. So I would say you are going to be fine to run these at 45. I did Cradle of Shadows at level 25 last week. So it's really not that difficult. There are just some mechanics that you may see, and there are a few DLC dungeons that will surprise you for the most part, for difficulty-wise as a level 45. Same goes with normal Dragonstar, Black Rose, Maelstrom, and Vatterstern Hollows. I would say as far as the group arenas being Dragonstar and Black Rose, these are pretty simple and are easier on a scale before Maelstrom and Vatterstern. For the solo arena, solo Maelstrom is easier than normal Vatterstern. Normal Vatterstern isn't a joke. So soft requirements for these are at least CP 160 in my opinion, and I would even say for Maelstrom, and Vatishrin closer to CP 200, because again, I struggled with normal Vatishrin, and expectations is you need to have a build for these. Again, either craft something, farm an overland set or beginner dungeon set. You don't need to have the best in slot to complete these on normal, but you do need to have a viable build. Now, let's talk about normal trials. These are right after the arenas in the veteran dungeons. Normal trials are very, very fun in my opinion, but can pose a challenge for newer players. These can be done at CP 160, but some trials are harder and need to be taken into account. I won't be able to go through all of them, but 3 that are definitely harder is Rockgrove, Maw of Lorcage, and Kind's Aegis. Things that you can expect with normal trials are you need to try to have 2 5-piece sets as a DPS. For healers and tanks, your level requirement may need to be higher because you are very important in trials. So I would say you need to try to have some form of monster sets to help you and your team out. It isn't completely necessary, but it does help. Next, you have the plus versions of normal trials. These are in trials like Cloud Rest, and these are definitely a challenge, and the expectations and requirements for these need to be higher than CP 160 in my opinion. If you're confused about the pluses, basically what it is if you're doing Cloud Rest +1, that means that you will only kill 2 of the mini bosses before the final boss, and the 1 mini boss that you do not kill will be in the final fight for the final boss. It adds more mechanics and it adds a higher DPS check in a way. These are ranked right above normal trials. Next is Vet Arenas. So I have done Vet Maelstrom and part of Vet Dragonstar. I have not done Vet Black Rose or Vet Vatishrin Hollows, but what I do know about Vet Vatishrin and Black Rose are they are very difficult compared to Vet Maelstrom and Vet Dragonstar. These vet activities, at least for Vet Maelstrom and Dragonstar, I think a soft level is CP 300. That's a good place to shoot for, to at least try it. I know it can be done then, but it's going to still be very difficult. You definitely need a build with solid knowledge of your rotation, and one of the biggest requirements is just trying the activities out, because knowledge of the mechanics will help you so much with these arenas. You really have to fail a bunch to eventually understand it. I died over 100 times in Vet Maelstrom Arena before I beat the arena. It was difficult. Okay, and you have to keep trying. For Vatishrin Hollows and Black Rose, I think you should probably be a little higher than CP 300 in my opinion. But again, some players might have been able to do this at lower levels, but just know that these are definitely a skill and DPS check. Now this brings me to Vet DLC dungeons and their hard modes. These are some of the most enjoyable pieces of content in the game in my opinion, and I absolutely love these. I want to note that some of these are actually probably easier than some of those vet arenas. But again, I am trying to give a general idea. I can't go through every single piece of content with those, but these, you need to be at least 300 CP to queue for these in the queue, but you can teleport in before then with your teammates if you want to, but I still would recommend being at least CP 300. I would recommend that. You definitely need full sets to do these dungeons, and your tanks and healers need to know what they're doing, and they need to be geared out well. You also need to have good knowledge of your rotation. The mechanics you can learn, so don't be shy to learn them. Don't let that deter you from doing it. Some of these dungeons do require some DPS checks, or it makes it extremely difficult. You need to realize that if your team is not hitting those checks, you will need to practice more, or you'll need to keep trying. Now, when it comes to the hard modes, these are very difficult for some of these, and these require a lot of team coordination. They require, again, set synergy and knowledge with your build. The last in-game content on here is Vet Trials. These are the hardest forms of content in the game, and I have only done the Craglorn Trials on Vet, but let me tell you, Veteran is not a joke. There is a reason that it takes groups months to finish some of these trials on Veteran. So what I would tell you with the level requirements in the DPS parses is for Craglorn Vet Trials, you can complete it with your team hitting 50 to 60k DPS per person. That's possible. It's not going to be easy, but it's possible. So if a person is also struggling, you can have other people pick up their slack with DPS. Like we as a team we were probably averaging 55k DPS doing some of the Vet Craglorn trials. So it's possible, but it's not easy. For other trials in the game, you definitely need to be pushing 60k plus DPS per person. For tanks and healers, they need to have sets on that help the team out. And regarding sets in general, everyone needs to be geared out the best of their ability, because that is crucial. For level, again, this is a ballpark, but I would say somewhere between 4 and 500 CP for Crag Trials is something that you can shoot for, and 600 plus at least for others. You need to have a build, again, fully built out and a lot of knowledge of your rotation. You also need to know the mechanics. Last thing with these is you need to know that this is a time commitment with vet trials. It's hard to get 12 people together each week. And so if you commit to these, you need to make sure that you know that you're going to usually be putting in a big time commitment, okay? So just keep that in mind, okay? This is not like a thing where you're just like, okay, I'm not going to show up this week. These prog groups take it very, very seriously, and you need to make sure that you understand that requirement, okay? It takes a lot of effort to do this type of content, and so people have to be on time. So to wrap up this video, I hope you have a better understanding of knowing when you're ready for harder content in the game. There's a lot of things that you can do, and it's very difficult knowing when that step needs to be taken. Again, a lot of these activities are things that you need to try out at least, because if you don't, you won't ever know your baseline. But the tier list should help you set goals. The expectations should help you understand what's expected at this level of content, so you know, like, hey, this is where I'm at now. I just need to get to this point. And so I hope that this helped you out. If it did, make sure to like, subscribe, heavy attack that bell icon to stay up to date on all the content in the channel. It does really help the channel out. You can always, again, follow me on Twitter. Check out the website at brahwegotthis.com. You can always ask me questions down below in the comments and on the Twitch chat. Those links in the Discord are all below in the description. But I do hope this all helped you out. Just remember to have faith, be great, y'all, and I'll see you on ESO.